Oh boy, we're really doing this, aren't we? It's said that the value of an art piece is proportional to the amount and fervor of the discussions it generates. If we take this grossly simplified statement at face value, then NG Todoroki, aka Endeavor from My Hero Academia, has to be Japan's Mona Lisa. This fictional man has collectively sparked more discourse than I care to recap, and while the presence of such discourse is sometimes obnoxious, I see it as a loud confirmation that my belief about Endeavor is true, namely that he is a phenomenally constructed character. Why do I think that? Well, I hope you have about half an hour to talk about that. But first, a few terms. 1. I know I already made an Endeavor video, but that one sucks, so I'm gonna make another one. Sue me. 2. While Endeavor is decidedly non-real and is nothing more than a bunch of scribbles on paper, the topics his narrative is interwoven with are very real and continue to harm people every second. Thus, I will try to take a kinder tone when discussing those aspects, and I'd like you all to do the same. Endeavor is fake and has never hurt a real person, and praise of his fictional character does not indicate the desire to hurt a real person. But the imagery he represents certainly has caused harm. Make that distinction, be responsible. Endeavor has over the last few years steadily fought his way up my list of personal favorite HEROACA characters, where he now comfortably rests at number 1 or 2 depending on how I feel. Now, do not make the Twitter teens mistake of thinking that good character means good person, because it most certainly doesn't. Endeavor is a bastard, a terrible person who took way too long to even attempt to right his wrongs in any meaningful way. But as a character, a fictional construct within the space of written artistry, the work, planning and execution of Endeavor's arc has so far been of a quality I can only describe as deliciously complicated. But one thing after another. What is Endeavor's arc, actually? The basic gist of abuser seeks atonement is correct, but that bite-sized description eschews some of the more relevant details. An ambitious youth, NG Todoroki pursues the position of number 1 with frightening fervor. In his 20s, he accepts that it isn't meant to be, and so turns to passing the torch so that his offspring may fulfill his dreams. However, even the hands which beckon another's hand in marriage are guided by fiery, reckless ambition as he turns to the antiquated practice of quirk marriage to guarantee a child with enormous potential, a perfect fire-ice hybrid, inheriting Enge's fire with none of his overeating drawbacks. However, there was one flaw in this disgusting plan. Rei Himura, the woman he chose, calmed his fury. Enji's ambition, for a beautiful while, took a back seat, so much so that when his first child only has fire abilities, he is content. His family is not what he wanted, but he doesn't need it to be anymore. Blessed with a son and a daughter, both far cries from the masterpiece he had envisioned, Enji finds peace, if only for a while. His son, his shining hope, emits flames many times stronger than him, promising to become the hero Enji could never be. But when his flames grow too strong for the boy's weakened body to handle, his father is once again in the dilemma. Discourage the boy for his own safety, or allow him to burn himself for glory. And just like last time he had to make a choice, Enji makes the worst possible one. In a twisted attempt to keep him safe, he pushes his son aside, attempting to quell the flame of ambition he so eagerly passed on to him. Desperate and growingly insane, Enji becomes a monster to his family, an angry, unhinged man who, in an ultimate act of rottenness, chooses to produce more children, in the vain hope that it would snuff out the desire his first son held only because of him. As Enji claws out his perfect heir, an ice and fire user, as he trains and nurtures him grimly and brutally, as he breaks his wife's spirit to the point of collapse, the despair it awakens in the firstborn's rejected heart reduces him to ash, a tragedy the family never recovers from. Enji Todoroki lays in a cradle of ash and soot of his own making, having ruined the lives of his wife, his children, and his own. In frustration, he devotes his all to complete his masterpiece, to push his youngest son further and harder. Enji Todoroki burns away in the flames of his own ambitions, and all that is left is the sickening desire for greatness, and a never-ending endeavor. This is the baseline, the man we meet at the start of the series. But as you surely know, that isn't where he stays. His ambitious trance would continue well into the teenage years of his son until, suddenly, the monolith falls. All Might, the symbol of peace and the eternal peak Endeavor strove towards, crumbles and reveals a weak, hollow skeleton of a man. And just as suddenly, Enji seems to awaken. The very notion of what number 1 even means seems as hollow and ephemeral as the figure who stands in the crater. For the first time, Enji Todoroki asks himself what he wants, what he really wants, and what that means. He finds his dream shallow and his home ruined, and he does the unthinkable. He regrets. He well and truly, deeply regrets his life. Moving onward, he would seek to make amends in various ways. A more direct tone with the public he now held responsibility for, a desire to resolve the pain he inflicted onto his family, and an act of giving them the distance and space to heal. But as the truth of his life comes out, as his missing son returns to haunt him, a mangled specter of the evil that Enji was, as the society he vowed to protect crumbles under his very palms, he finally breaks. He can't do it. How could he? A few nice words and some money he throws at building his family a new home would obviously never undo the horrors he had made them live through. No amounts of shallow platitudes could rebuild his son out of the ashes his rage had left behind. No act of self-criticism could return his wife the years she had spent trapped in the hospital. Enji Todoroki's endeavor was truly endless, an eternal punishment for his evil. What I have exhaustively laid out here is the basic arc of Endeavor, the general beats of his story. But what makes this arc work is how it merges with the general themes of HEROACA. Fundamentally, MHA presents a discussion on heroism, a rumination on what it means to truly do good and where and how that potential emerges. It also dabbles in a bit of criticism, demystifying the hero ideal as only another vestige of superficial capitalist society, as seen with the many examples of systemic abandonment throughout the series. All these thematic approaches meet in the man named Endeavor, as he presents maybe the most deliciously complicated combination of these aspects. On one hand, he is by all accounts a terrible person, someone who made his entire family suffer for no reason other than his own ego, someone who only at the cusp of collapse finally realized why his actions were wrong, 2 whole decades into tormenting his loved ones. On the other hand, however, he is an outstanding hero, being introduced with the specific mention that among all the heroes of Japan, he has solved the most cases and, by implication, saved the most lives. So, how do we resolve this question of heroism? Well, we could go the pragmatic in-universe route. Endeavor has, at worst, ruined around 33 lives if we count the people Dabi has killed, which in of itself isn't the most reasonable thing either. Dabi is a grown man and his actions aren't Endeavor's. By this logic, we could hold Nana responsible for Shigi's murders. Meanwhile, Endeavor has over a 30-year-long career, most likely saved multiple hundreds, maybe a few thousands of lives. If we don't look at this from purely the perspective of his family, but the perspective of the larger, grander society, he has saved so many people, he is a hero. Under this lens, purely looking at the numbers pragmatically, he absolutely does embody the heroism the story demands. On the flip side, however, let's look at it from a pure reader's perspective. Sure, we are given the abstract implication that he has saved so and so many people, but when it comes to actual heroic action, it takes him 180 chapters until we see him do even the slightest heroic acts, and even those pale in comparison to the terror we see him inflict onto his family. A fictional character can be given as many offhand details as one wants, they still remain defined by the actions they are shown doing, and Endeavor is consistently shown to be a piece of shit. Even after he begins his road to atonement, it's placid and slow, and simply cannot make up for his misdeed. We cannot count the horrors we see as equally valid as the good deeds we tangentially hear about. Endeavor is the furthest thing from a hero possible. Both of these interpretations of Endeavor are valid ways to look at his character, as they are both stringently based on the text. And while you're welcome to spend hours trying to find a way to marry these two images to one another or to dismiss either as false, I think the whole point of Endeavor's existence narratively is exactly thus both of those sides are true and incompatible. A big aspect of HEROACA'S critique of heroism is the conflict between the heroic symbol and the heroic reality. The virtues and symbolic omnipotence of heroes can simply not be upheld by regular people. It's a system that is doomed to fail. The only reason it really even functioned for a few years was because of an unreasonable superhuman demigod who was able to be a hero with almost no limits. But after All Might is gone, society has to now rely on itself, and so it receives as its symbol a man who reflects the imperfection of society. Just like Endeavor tries to be a hero in spite of its very obvious and very detrimental flaws, society pretends to be a heroic utopia despite its very obvious dysfunctions. Endeavor is the hero they deserve, a reflection of a broken system. That isn't to say, however, that Endeavor's dichotomous tale is just a slave to some lofty thematic parallels. On a pure character level, Endeavor offers up some really fascinating ideas. For example, it's pretty interesting to see how he's initially portrayed as an irredeemable asshole, and how this impression is slowly contextualized into a more human story without really absolving him. The more details we get on Endeavor's household, the more we get to understand that he wasn't some cartoonish evil monster, but a man who at one point genuinely loved his family and was content with what he had. All the decisions he made were done out of an internal logic that, in his mind, told him that he was doing things right. And yet, none of this context makes him look like any less of a bastard. In fact, most of these actively make him seem worse than he was at the start. Everything that plunged the Todoroki household further into torture was unambiguously his fault. He chose to push Toya, he chose to throw him away, he chose to have another child. He may have done those things with intention that seemed good to him, but that doesn't erase the fact that he, a grown-ass man, made these choices himself. All of these choices were very obviously bad and stupid, and Endeavor made them because he was deluded and an idiot and a piece of shit. And yet, you can't help but wonder why he is like this. Was he just already so far gone, or is it some deeper issue? He is consistently characterized as awkward and socially distant, so maybe his downfall was his lack of interpersonal competence and emotional intelligence, something that would also inform his slow and clumsy attempts at atonement. Visually, calling him a hothead would be very on the nose, but his design absolutely is meant to hammer you over the head with that impression. A walking volcano with anger issues isn't exactly subtle, but just like Enji himself, his looks do undergo some subtle changes. When we first meet him, he is literally just a man on fire, his costume being little more than a blue onesie. However, in tandem with this emotional turn, his costume receives these metal pauldrons, containing and focusing his flames into more deliberate shapes, a nod to how he resolves to get his flaming ambition under control in pursuit of atonement. And of course, his scar continues the theme of all flame-using Todorokis being burnt, a reminder that a power so perfect for heroism comes at a cost, while also visualizing the danger of literally playing with fire. His scar being inflicted by Hood-chan, someone who Endeavor openly likens to his past self, also creates the connection between that scar and the scars the old Endeavor has left on his family and on himself. And beyond that, Endeavor presents maybe the quintessential example of HEROACA'S core myth. That while heroism can emerge from anywhere, it requires honesty, sacrifice, and endurance to sustain. In the case of someone like our main character Deku, those virtues are associated with his shonen main character journey of working hard to become stronger. Endeavor, meanwhile, has to embody those elements through his atonement. He must sacrifice the commodity of ignoring his past. He must honestly face those he has hurt, and he must endure the hardships he deserves. Only through this can he become someone worthy of saving not just people's bodies, but their souls. And to his credit, despite how much shit I've been giving him today, once he wakes from his insane delusion, able to see the damage he has done, Enji does indeed resolve to do all of those things. His attempts at both finally being a true father to his children and to give his wife the opportunity to leave the hospital into a home without her being forced to endure his presence may seem meager compared to his evils, but none of these are easy things you just do quickly to cover up mistakes. These are long-term committal acts that Enji seems to take eagerly. We then also find out that he built his agency in the hopes of finding his lost son, alive and well, attracted by the office that scouts fire users. So when he breaks down after the war, those tears seem not like the crocodile tears of a coward faced with the inability to escape responsibility, but like the genuine sobs of a broken man who realizes that all of his efforts cannot and will not ever undo the horror he created. His own flesh and blood, charred and mangled, inviting him to a tango in the inferno of hell, is a reality no amount of resolve can overcome. He cries the bitter tears of a man who must realize that he will never be good enough to outdo his own evil past. Self-pitiful, for sure, but 100% human. And I hope that at this point it has become clear that there is only one constant in Endeavor's life. He must always work on the impossible. Be it to try and surpass All Might, or to bridge the seared gaps he created in his relationships, it is his eternal quest to toil and struggle at tasks that greatly outweigh his own abilities. The word to endeavor means to try hard, to work in service of a goal. It also carries connotations of exhaustion, of difficulty, of challenge. There is no better word that could describe Enji Todoroki, the man tasked with countless and endless endeavors. A man who must forever work on himself and his actions, as the weight of not just his personal life, but the lives he's entrusted with, weigh him down in an already uphill battle to betterment. His name, Enji Todoroki, marks him as the roaring master of flame, a grandiose sounding title that nonetheless denotes the roaring despair his flames have led him to, a master of nothing but decay and ash. And yet, he toils, he moves forward, he endeavors. Whether or not he is a hero or even a good person isn't really what defines Enji Todoroki. It's that he is deeply human to a catastrophic fault. He is the human successor to a divine hero of a splendor inaccessible to a mortal. And yet he takes the position, because this new age of heroism needs not one monolith of peace, but a human symbol of imperfection, a sign that heroism can be born out of the most unlikely, unseemly circumstance. Endeavor is far from being a good person, and he will probably never be able to fully atone. But god damn it, he will try. He will try and try and try, just as it is our human providence to progress past our limits, past our past. He may reflect some of the ugliest traits of our society, but he nonetheless reflects a narrative of change, a desire to do better against all odds. He chooses this. He chooses to become a better person, and while that absolutely cannot outdo his past, it must be worth something. The same way our daily grind, our personal struggles, our tiny lives of good must be worth something in the face of humanity's bottomless malice and history of endless cruelty. Endeavor is the most human hero in My Hero Academia, and his story is one that interweaves with the themes of the plot in ways that I personally find just incredibly fascinating. Every time he is on screen, I am learning something new, something interesting. Every word he speaks and every glimpse of his past we get, his life becomes a bit more deliciously complicated, turning and twisting into an absolute banger of a subplot. And it's not even over yet. Who knows where the story and this man will go, and who knows what other videos I will make on him because of it. But whatever may happen, we know what we need to do, because Endeavor told us himself. Just watch me. So hey, thank you all for watching. I am so sorry that this video ended up being so late. I moved, which you can probably also hear and could hear in the video as opposed to the echo. Yeah, I'm sorry about that as well, but I'm just gonna have to fix that as it happens. But anyway, thank you all for watching, and of course a special thank you to all our patrons. That includes Daniel Garcia, Fictionape, Paracha, Cini, Victor Perez, Trader, and Mr. Meander. Thank you all so much. Be safe, and I hope to see you sooner rather than later. Take care and be safe. Bye bye.